Welcome to this afternoon's work session of the Washington County Board of Ed. We have some great things today on the agenda and great friends. I'm turning it over to you, Dr. Savine.
Thank you, President Zentmeyer. It is our pleasure to introduce the principal of Boonsboro High School, Dr. Mike Kahanick, who will highlight some of the initiatives at Boonsboro High School for promoting positive school climate and fostering student engagement and academic and personal growth. So we look forward to hearing from Dr. Kahanick as he shares the many successes of Boonsboro High School.
Good afternoon. Dr. Zentmeyer, President, and Vice President Mr. Gessford, and Dr. Savine, Superintendent, thank you for inviting us to showcase Boonsboro High today. It's a great privilege, and I want to thank Dr. Zentmeyer and Mr. Burton for already coming this year to tour our school to kind of get a firsthand look at what goes on in the high schools and discuss the programs of studies. So today, good for my presentation here. Can they see it now? There we go. Yep. All right. So the agenda I'm going to cover is kind of give a broad connection on how we find a purpose for every student. I found in my career that the more a student has a purpose for why they go to school, the better things are that happen for them. And we've spent a lot of attention and efforts to try to meet the personal needs of each individual student. And that's what I hope you understand today. We call it finding their genius. We truly believe every child has a genius at Boonsboro High School. It's just a matter if you can tap into it and exploit it and get it to its maximum potential. So at Boonsboro High School, we have CTE, dual credits, AP courses, Blue Good Standing. Flex is a kind of a flexible period in which students have the opportunity to do many different things, and I'll explain all these in detail. The arts programs and athletics programs, and we believe that it's all of these programs, not one, that brings the opportunity for students to maximize their opportunities and potential. First one I'm going to discuss is completer programs. The completer programs, we start all the way back in the 8th grade. We have 14 different completers. If you actually pull on the campus of Boonsboro High School, you'll see banners in the parking lot. Those banners actually capture each CTE completer that's in our school. And the banners were actually developed by students in one of our other CTE courses in the IMP program. So we try to also do hands-on opportunities for students that are actually real-world experience. Even when you walk in the first part of the auditorium, for example, if you see the doormats, you'll see those artistic doormats that's in the art wing. That was dedicated and completed by students as well. They designed those floor mats, and we also put those in production. So landscape, many different things you'll see. But we start in the 8th grade, so we bring our 8th grade, all 8th grade students come over twice, once to see all the CTE programs, and another time to then pick select programs, 2 different programs to kind of get a showcase for the day and really get a good experience on what they want to do. And then as we do the scheduling, we do that, it coincides with it. So when the 8th graders do their course selection sheets, they have the opportunity then to pick the completers that are relevant to their interests and field questions with us. And we do those in orientation nights with the parents as well, with an encouragement for all students to entertain at least taking one completer, one CTE pathway that they find of interest. So this also becomes big in when the students are assigned to a completer. We take this all the way through, including, I know the board's familiar with what's called student support team meetings, in which we actually go down into the individual levels of students that are struggling. And we actually have a spreadsheet even in there. So when we meet with students who are, for example, everything from attendance concerns to behavior concerns to even resourcing, we meet with the students, and that's one of our focal points, is to discuss about their purpose and their goal, and how do we make sure that they get them to those outcomes. Overall, if you look at the programs themselves, we're privileged to have 14 completer programs at Boonsboro High School. 23 have certifications. The IRC gains from Mr. Perry and Dr. Wilcox have been huge for our school in regards to gaining mileage for giving students relevance. The industrial certifications actually get the students very excited. We've been growing the welding certifications, for example, is one. Homeland Security just did the FAA drone certification, and we always have Word, Excel certifications. So a lot of industrial certifications have real-world relevance, and the CNA license, for example, the GNA coming out in the nursing. I had students actually come out this past year from that CNA GNA program starting at $20+ an hour with a summer job right down in Farnakidi, and they were super excited for the opportunity to walk in as professionals as going into their senior year. These were juniors, so it was really an exciting opportunity. The students then pick them, and here's the percentage of the students for each completer, and where they fall. I wouldn't say that there's one more important than the others. Some are more comprehensive than others. For example, the Power Mac one with the welding, that's going to be a double block next year, which is a double time to give 3 certifications in three different types of welding. So some of them take a little bit longer than others, but they are all very relevant. And you can see that there's a broad array from apprenticeship to the jobs to nursing, sports medicine, homeland security, software, computer science, carpentry, and we offer all those. So it's pretty rare that we find a student that doesn't find an interest in one of the CTEs. And so if you can see that we have over 68% of our students graduate with a CTE completer. And many of those students have multiple completers as well. And we encourage them to get as much certification and accreditations as they can get. Some students are going straight for the career path or the college pathway. We do have many students that go to many four-year universities. If you see our senior spotlight on Facebook, because we do 2 students every day, you would see the array of colleges we have students going to, everywhere from Kentucky to Tennessee, to we have one just accepted to Princeton, to MIT. We have a lot of students going to very high-end schools. So they also want an academia track. And we're privileged to offer 28 dual credits. The partnership with HCC that Dr. Willow and others have unfolded in the curriculum team has been essential to keeping our kids on campus. And we think that's also a good place and safe place for many of them to be. Not every student's ready to be free all day, every day. So we think it's a great opportunity if they can do it while they're there with the support of a high school teacher as well. And currently, we have 457 dual credits on campus this year that are being tried. I hope we'll get them all there, but we know it's a high percentage rate of them getting there. But 249 students are actually enrolled in dual credit courses. And you can see that, I'm not going to read all the courses, but you can see there's a vast array of college courses that we offer. I really want to just give this as an attribute to, but this one and the next slide, which is the AP courses. I really think this has a huge compliment to the board for being able to maintain competitive salaries for teachers over the last few years. The opportunity to get those competitive teachers is why we were able to do this, because they have the expertise in so many different areas. So these are all singletons, most of them. They're only offered one time during the day, which creates a master schedule challenge. But we do our best to get it. But the teachers actually ask for these independent courses. They ask to teach these one-offs, even though it's an extra prep, because it aligns to their passions, their degrees, and their level of expertise. And attracting the best teachers is one way that I believe you get these kinds of opportunities for students. And currently, we have 178 students in AP courses, so if you go to the advanced placement, and our pass rate is around 65% of those. And those 178 students, obviously, we have students who take multiple AP courses. And so they'll take 266 tests this year. Collectively, we have 23 AP courses. So when you add that with the 28, you're talking about 51 advanced college courses or college level courses for students to earn college credits. It's not uncommon for many of our students to earn 30 plus credits to 50 credits, even though we've just rolled the HCC partnership out just over a year ago. So we've had some great success in that. And the AP is striving. We have a lot of students who take the AP specifically in their major so that they can compete at a high level when they get to college in those classes. They understand oftentimes they may not get the college credit if it's a major, but they can transfer them as elective credits and still sit in those classrooms. For example, in engineering, we can do AP Chem 2. You're not going to forego the physics classes in the college for your major, but it can prepare you at a high level when you sit next to them, and they also have competitive GPAs to keep you in those programs. AP courses can be a real game changer for students. The next thing is a program we call, it's our Blue Good Standing program. I'm sure you've heard of PBIS before. This is kind of our version of that. It's an adjusted version, but it pretty much aligns to the same effort. And what we do is we try to promote good behavior by extrinsic rewards and making sure students explore. The big piece of this too is also, to me, from being from a kind of like a semi-rural county where Washington County is, it gives students an opportunity to explore things they may not be able to explore. Sometimes in our smaller towns, students don't get a chance to get outside of them a lot. They could be resource deficit. And so some of these things become much bigger than they may be to other students, but they are big to most students. And we have 2 different programs. One is a good standing program, which just aligns basically to the same as our athletic eligibility. We figure, you know, if you can be on the fields and sports, but we have some students who aren't playing sports, so maybe that's not a motivator for them. So this picks up that gap for students who may not be motivated to participate in the athletics, but we want them to be motivated to still succeed. So we focus on attendance, behavior, and you can see in our good standing, they still can't have in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension. They still may get a referral or two from a teacher, but they have a chance to curb their behavior, and it's not significant behavior, and that's evaluated every single month. Now, the blue is a little heavier, and that's where the students are. We're really trying to push those students to a higher level. We kind of line it to college. The reason we do you must have a C in every course is because if you get a D in college, you can lose your funding. And it's also when a D in college, if you go below 2.0, is when you get on academic probation or may be forced to withdraw from the college. So we want students to understand that while there is a D, that's not where we want our students to hover. We don't want them in danger of failing. We want them to at least accept C work. But we also don't want to exclude kids because some students and some, like I said at the beginning of this presentation, we do believe every student has a genius, but not every student's a genius everywhere. And so a C for some students in an English class is okay. Maybe they get the A in the science, and that's what we want to honor. So we want to honor the students as a whole and collectively, but also understand that not every student is a straight A student, and that's okay as long as they're putting forth their best foot. And currently, we're excited that we have 63%. This is the highest benchmark since I've been the principal there, of students who are now in blue, which means they are a C or better in every single class. They have not had a referral. This is a marking period reward. So those students have not had a referral in the last marking period. And they're also meet the good standing and qualifications and non-chronic absenteeism. So that's where we really focused on the absenteeism. The events that we include, we have monthly events for good standing as well. And this is the kind of the motivator. And you can see them there. There's everything from the homecoming to the prom coming up in the next 2 weeks. We actually had a drama production. We had our students came to watch our students perform. That's one of my favorites, is when the students get to showcase themselves within the school. And so they can come see different performances. And then, of course, like I said, blue's kind of a higher tier. So those students had the opportunity to go to Top Golf, a 4DX movie, which I'm glad I did not go. It's Moana 2, and I would have been seasick. But it's, you know, sprays and mist and everything, and then Urban Air for Marking Period 3. So these were bus trips. They were big and well attended. About 200 students went on each one. And for some of these kids, it's the first time they've had an opportunity to do some of these things. So, or to see this type of area or to go outside the area in that way. So it's a great team building, great exercise, and great activity, and the students and staff have a blast. The news program that we had this past year, we kind of piloted it with Clear Spring, and it's I'm not sure if theirs is the same acronym, but we chose FLEX, and it's flexible learning, and what that means is that it's kind of a period that does a lot. We've really welcomed this at Boonsboro High because we have so many needs for so many different meetings, senior meetings, class meetings, and now we've found ways to do those meetings without disrupting the school day. You have the counseling lessons that have to go into the students too on everything from Naviance and college preparation. And this allows students to have the counselors to push in without, again, having to miss academic days. And basically the gist of it is that on Monday and Friday, you can move about the school into extracurricular that are academics. I put in there that 25 co-curricular clubs and organizations. These are your honor societies. These are your things that are tied to our curriculum. They're curriculum specific and curriculum aligned organizations and clubs. Student government, that type of thing. So they can move to those on Mondays and Fridays. Monday through Friday, as long as you're not a student who's identified with a math or reading support, you can move to any teacher. This has been very good for our teachers. Making up work for students with absenteeism and those things and labs and all those, it oftentimes has to wait, it's delayed. This allows us to do real-time makeup, real-time intervention, real-time tutorial for students. We are moving students constantly every day to do remediation, to find out missed work, or just to get support. And the teacher can just write a pass through the electronic pass system, and that student can jump from during this period each day to the teacher they need to. And all teachers are off during this time, so there's no reason that we can't, you cannot get to a teacher. You can get to every teacher you need to get to. And that's been a game changer for many of our students for our failure rate. Our failure rate has definitely declined even more, and we have a really low failure rate for students. And I attribute a lot to this opportunity for kids. It also provides the Maryland Blueprint, which many of you are aware of, requires intervention for our students who are struggling with math and reading deficits. We do that intervention in this time with the English teachers and the math teachers 3 days per week. And then we allow them to do the winter test, and some of them, and if they make that winter test, and they don't make it, then we can re-intervene and hopefully get them through in the spring so that they show proficiency and they can move past those 2 proficiency exams that are required by Maryland.
I have a question.
Sure.
So when it comes to like the SGA and stuff like that, I'm assuming that there's a teacher who is actually with the children. So if that teacher needs to help a student, how do you kind of choreograph
Why
that?
we only do it on Mondays and Fridays, and they actually have a day. It's on a master calendar
Okay.
that we track it. That's a great question, because they don't meet every week. So like SGA only meets, for example, once a month. But we track them so that the clubs also know when students are being pulled, because many leaders of the organizations, such as the NHS and others, they're leaders in other areas in the building. So we try to separate them so that there's not a lot of overlap in those club meetings. So it would only be like 1 day per month that you should run into that complication. So that for that 1 day, the teacher would say, hey, don't come to my class today. I'm not going to be able to provide, but I can get you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Great question. The other thing that we love to stress at the Boonsboro High is the arts. We have a strong art program. You can see the art opportunities that we have for our students, everywhere from digital photography 1 through 4 to guitar 1 to 4 to piano, orchestra, band, show choir, your traditionals, but also a lot of the ones that are off the beaten path, theater and drama. And our enrollment is really high in the arts. It's something that we promote strongly. We even have a sound crew for the Flex that actually comes back and they actually learn to work the sound booth. That's generated by them as well. And then, of course, we do offer dual credit courses like the History of Rock and Roll. That's a great elective to kind of get one of your gen eds out if you're a college-bound student and get your art credit out of the way if you're going to school, if you're not going to be an art major. The participation rates for the arts is, like I said, significant. We have 192 students that perform in our student ensembles. 305 students perform in visual arts. That would include like your digital photography and your art class itself. 29 students are in the dual credits. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is that we have 45 performances at the end of the school year that these are official performances that are evaluative performances that our students actually participate in each year when you do the course orchestra and those. So we do take a lot in the arts. We honor the arts. There tends to be some competition between athletics, but I don't see it as a competition. I see it as an opportunity for both.
What's your total enrollment?
Our total enrollment at the school is around 750, or if you add into technical high school students, we're close to 850.
All right.
We fluctuate between 8 and 850 for total enrollment, and then about 750 to 800 for our on-campus enrollment. For our athletics, we are proud to have one of the strongest athletic programs. We do offer the most varsity sports of any school. We are filling them quite well. As you can see, we have over 650 plus athletes participating in the sports. And the statistic that I just can't get over every time, because this keeps actually going up, is that 60% of our students play in at least one sport. And I think that's a testament to the coaches. And if you add up our coaches, we have about 100 coaches that are working with our athletes in the sports when you add up volunteers and assistants as well. And many of those are community members that come and give back, and I can't give a loud enough shout out to coaches. They do so much and give so much for so little. And it's a game changer for many of our students. I have students, we even have an 8th grade program where we have students coming over right now and have been actively coming over for months to start getting ready for football. And it's just a weightlifting kind of health-focused time after school. And we have about 30 students pretty much 3 days a week that are coming over from the middle school just to start getting engaged. And it's those types of programs and feeder programs that really make an effort. And the feeder programs, The feeder programs are big. The athletics don't happen by accident. We do have a Meet the Coaches night for every single season. We have a Meet the Warrior night where they actually still sing their fight song. That one's in shock to me. I haven't seen too many schools still do the fight song. That one's neat to see. The student body actually embrace that, and that's tradition at its best right there. And then the incoming freshmen, of course, we have incoming freshman nights, youth nights. I just did a youth night the other night with the senior night for girls lacrosse, for example, and the girls lacrosse team walked the youth girls out onto the field with them. And to see that level of partnership from the little kids, and they look up to them like they're idols for sure. And it builds a program that really has an impact on a community. Athletics is huge at Boonsboro High, as well as each of these individual programs. Before I get to questions, I just want to give a quick shout out to Ms. Downen, Ms. Comstock, my assistant principals, Ms. Kromka, my lead teacher, my counseling department leader, Ms. Taylor, Mr. Baker, my CTE department leader, Ms. Wadding, my arts department leader, and Mr. Marsh, my athletic director, for helping me to put this presentation together today, and also for the instrumental role they play in each one of these programs. And now I'd be happy to open the floor to questions.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I'll start out. Say first, I just saw in the newspaper today, both your lacrosse teams are top in the region. So congratulations to that. Good job. And then going back to the blue good standing, just a quick question. I see about a little more than 18% of your kids are either academically not eligible, chronically absent, or had some kind of referral. I'd assume that most of those are probably the absence or tardies. Do you have a breakdown of those three that would make up the 18% there?
I don't have a breakdown, but you're right. Chronic absenteeism would be the most prevalent of the reasons you're removed. It's definitely not behavior, and it's definitely not the failure rate. We do credit recovery in each period and during the flex times too, so our failure rate's not the big one. And we do work with the chronics. We put many of them on contracts, example, for prom to try and get them the last chance, even though they've kind of struggled to get there. We want to get them towards the end. If they can rise at the end, it's still okay. But I can get you that individual breakdown if you wish.
Yeah, and I'd kind of be curious because I like, the way you had that program set up with the reward system too. I'd be curious to see, I don't know how long you've been doing this, but I'd be curious to see what it was before you were doing this and after also. See
Yeah,
if
we've
there's
been
any
doing it
change.
since I've took the school.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, in 2019. It just keeps growing. There's pieces of it I'd like to grow more, but you can only do so much. Like, for example, there's a lunch piece with it. If you're a blue student, you can go eat in designated areas, the outside courtyard down at the thing, because I don't need, you can do that at HCC as a junior. So I think if you can demonstrate that level of maturity, you should be given the same level of maturity you'd get at the HCC campus as a junior. So.
Daphne?
Yeah. You were speaking earlier about using the flex periods on Mondays and Fridays for certain clubs at the school, like student council, NHS. So do those clubs only meet like once a month during those assigned periods, or do they meet before school and after school as
They
well?
still do some before the school and after school. Like my National Honor Society still does some after school and before school meetings. I think it's more event guided. If they have something coming up where they're sponsoring or supporting an event, then they want to do it. For example, I know just today we're talking about NHS is doing reading over at the Boonsboro Elementary School in a partnership to reading to the elementary students. And I think they did some meetings before school to kind of get that going. So it's based on need. They can adjust to that. But we do keep the spreadsheet, not that you have to be cemented by the spreadsheet, but that we hope you use that as a consideration point when you're scheduling a meeting, that students may be tasked in other areas. And it also gives the student, if I'm a leader of this and I'm already on the books for this, it helps the advisor weigh that the student is prioritizing correctly. And I think it's just trying to support the student as well.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? So what big challenge remains for you at BHS?
Oh, geez. Should have gave that question in advance. That's a very good question. For the school as a whole, is that what you're saying? I think chronic absenteeism is still our nemesis. It's never rebounded since COVID. I still have students who just do not understand the importance of being there, and trying to get them to understand the importance of good attendance is important. I would also say if you go by the Maryland Culture Survey, the number one thing impacting us is substance abuse. The exposure that these students have is absolutely kind of scary. What students can access even by mail order is frightening, and the levels of toxicity in some of these THC things was eye-opening to me. We had a national speaker come last year, and it was heartfelt for me to see what our kids are exposed to, and I hear many people from, not that I'm going to date myself or age myself, but I hear many people from my generation saying, well, people always experimented with marijuana, they've smoked marijuana. It's not what our kids are facing. The THC levels are like in the 90+% levels. They were in the 5% levels. I'll go back as far as saying in my 80s. So I'm not going to keep going too far more than that. But in the 80s, they were in the 5% level. And so if you think of what the THC levels were then at 5%, and now they can access 90%, and what that impact can have on students as far as addictions, development, it's actually quite frightening. So if I were to say that, that would be the health piece of that, and then the chronic absenteeism would be my two largest concerns for Boonsboro High.
Do you find that those two coincide?
Absolutely.
Daryl, move your mic over.
That's just a quick one.
Yes, they do coincide.
So what's your next big idea?
If I find the opportunity, I really want to do leadership cadres to take on those issues and other issues. For example, like attendance is one big one, but like the blue, like during the lunch shift, I do believe there's the opportunity for students to be more leaders in the school. We oftentimes get so focused on time, but if you look at research will tell you that time in and of itself is not, we don't need more time in classes, we need more quality of time in classes. So I do believe there's opportunity for students to be a higher level of a leader within the school itself. And I think leadership cadres is the best way to do that. I think there's a way to mobilize. Oftentimes people look at students who, for example, who are struggling behaviorally, and they look at them as if they need to be kind of minimized or pushed aside. And I'm not saying that minimizing is not necessarily, that doesn't have to happen sometimes, but oftentimes I think it's a missed opportunity to embrace their leadership skills. We have positive leaders and we have negative leaders in the building. Many people who were negative leaders at one time became positive leaders, and I think you can shape that. And if I were to say the next initiative or effort that I would love to see come to fruition, it would be the identifying of all leaders in the school, including those who maybe aren't our straight A students, who aren't the ones who teachers typically celebrate, but identify them and empower those with the other leaders to expand leadership opportunities and let them own some of these efforts.
Every time I come to Boonsboro, I'm always impressed that your military background has provided such a even temper in the building, and everyone goes about their business very respectfully. And that father's heart that you share with your kids is so evident in your conversations with them. I appreciate you, and I certainly appreciate the time your staff and you have given to us in this presentation. Thank you so much.
Can you maybe just quote that so I can give it to my kids that I'm even leveled in my leadership, so for when I go home this evening, I can echo that as well. I also want to give you guys a pamphlet just so you can take one. I think it's important that kind of helps point the picture. And the one thing that's unique about this is it listed everything we covered here today. But in the CTEs, it also lists in here the advanced study courses that go with it. And I would encourage the board, as we explore CTE and continue to grow CTE, that we look at the opportunities for advanced studies within it. Agriculture, for example, is not just driving a tractor anymore. If you talk to some of the farmers and the GPS technologies and everything else they use to do harvesting and fields, it is tremendously technologically based now. And so I don't believe the CTE anymore. Well, I'm from Pittsburgh, a blue collar town. I don't think everything's just blue collar anymore. It does have advanced levels in everything. And it's important for our students understanding that if you go into the trades, there's still high levels of skills and things to do now, especially academically focused. So I want to thank you for your time and thank you for the opportunity. And feel free to reach out with me with email if you have any further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kanik. Certainly appreciate your leadership and also your focus on relationships. You know your community, you know your staff, you bring out the best in them, and just appreciate what you do to recruit and retain the very best so our Boonsboro community can be so successful, just like you just described. So thank you for your leadership. Yeah. Next, I would like to invite forward our Associate Superintendent of Administration and Leadership, Dr. Webster, along with Mr. Jacoby, our Director of Student Services, along with a number of school-level staff that will focus on providing some highlights on our most recent district discipline data, as well as our district approach over the last 3 years to improve school safety and school climate, the impact of this work, and our plans to continue to improve. Dr. Webster.
All right. Good afternoon, President Zentmeyer, members of the board, and Dr. Savine. As Dr. Savine just mentioned, I'm joined today by Mr. Jacoby, our Student Services Director, and several amazing school team members. For today's update to the board on student discipline, we will describe the work our district has engaged in over the last few years to continue to evolve our approach to supporting positive learning environments for our students. We will look at some current district discipline data. Then each of our school team members here today represents successful work in our schools, and we want to hear from them about what they see working when it comes to supporting our students in their behavioral growth and where they see opportunities for continued improvement. We will conclude our presentation today with ideas for future work to continue to support our schools and students. Before we discuss those areas, Mr. Jacoby will provide some information about state regulations that apply to our work here to set the context for student disciplinary action.
All right, good afternoon. So I'm going to start by sharing some of the state regulations that really creates parameters for all local school systems that we must follow when it comes to student discipline. So the first item listed here requires that our board policy and our regulations on student discipline should allow for discretion when imposing discipline. So currently our regulation and our exhibit JKE, which really serves as our guidelines to school administrators, do allow the administration to use their own discretion. So when there is an incident within the building and they're investigating that incident, they complete their investigation, they look at all the details of the incident, and they make a decision based on one of the 5 discipline response levels as to what's going to be the most appropriate action for that particular student for that incident. The second item is very important. In Maryland, suspensions of students in pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, and second grade are actually prohibited. There's only 2 reasons why you could suspend a student in those grades. One would be if there's a violation of federal law, which most commonly would be possession of a firearm on school property. The only other possibility for suspending or excluding a student in those lower grades for a particular incident is if after the administration consults with a mental health professional, the 2 both determine that there's too much of a risk to immediately return the student to school. And in that case, those removals are capped at 5 days, specifically for the purpose of giving the school team and the mental health professional a few days to meet with the parent and plan for create a safety plan for a safe return to the school environment. The third item here more so definitions. Principals or their designee assistant principals can suspend or remove a student from school for not more than 10 days per incident. And so those that are up to 3 days, so 1-day suspension, a 2-day suspension, or a 3-day suspension, we refer to those as short-term suspensions. The principal or their designee could also remove for disciplinary reasons a student for 4 to 10 days without seeking any additional permission for that. And we refer to those as long-term suspensions.
I have a question. Are we doing any in-school suspension for K through second?
Yes. So we have, that's a good question. So at our secondary schools, we actually have in-school suspension paraprofessionals.
No, for K through second.
So probably what that looks like at the elementary level is, it would vary by school, but there are different teams of teachers that might make them be available through a schedule to serve as like in-school suspension or in-school intervention in the event that a student needs to be removed from a class for a class period or part of the day. So most of our schools are kind of creative about creating that within their schedule, and they have that to a certain degree.
But we can actually make that happen, correct?
Yes.
Like we could have a
Legally,
class.
yes.
Yes. Is there a reason that we're not doing that on a wide scale? Like the student is bad, so instead of 5 days at home, they're in school for 5 days in this sort of in-school suspension per the law. I'm reading the law right here. We can do that. So I'm just wondering why we're not.
Well, again, I think it comes down to the discretion of the administrator. The incident that occurred, has there been previous incidents? The administration uses progressive discipline. So if it's the first incident that occurs with the student, they probably would certainly not exclude the student for 5 days from all classes.
Jesse can speak to that.
Okay.
So good afternoon. I'm Jesse Orth. I'm an assistant principal at Bester Elementary. You'll hear some of my things from Bester here in a minute, but to specifically address that question, at least I can speak for Bester, we do use in-school intervention a lot, even for students in kindergarten through second grade. So we try and keep students in the building if at all possible. Out-of-school suspensions are very rare for us, and when we are doing that, it is part of that progressive discipline process. And we've already taken additional steps like in-school intervention, those type of things prior to this, or the severity of the incident would require us to look at an out-of-school suspension for short term. So we do work creatively with scheduling of staff, with making sure that a teacher or someone who can support with schoolwork in an environment that for a couple of days that we can, again, provide the consequence, but at the same time ensure the education is continuing in a setting that can be, at the end of the day, teach a skill that might have been missing that may have led to the behavior.
So this is more reactive. We don't have anything kind of set up so that, I mean, like for instance, at Clear Spring, we heard this entire year kids have been getting chairs thrown at them and everything else. I would have to say that at this point, there is a reason that those students should not be in the classroom. So obviously you can't speak to that. But what I'm saying is we're not doing enough. And right here in the law, it doesn't show it up there, but we are allowed for kindergarten to second grade, we are allowed to remove them to a different spot within the school. I'm not saying that we have to expel these students, but at what point do we start caring about the children who are being abused under our watch?
I would say, was that a question too?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say in terms of one thing to think about is when you made the comment about reactionary, and one thing that we will get to in our presentation is there's no question that we have to think about the staffing for schools. A school like Bester has additional staff. They also have additional need, but a school like Clear Spring would have less staff available. So there is something that principals do have to be, our elementary principals have to be very creative. I look down at Miss Hammond too. She doesn't have a lot of staff wandering around. They have to be very creative when they're working with students. So the idea that Mr. Jacoby was discussing, our secondary schools with an in-school suspension or intervention para, they're staffed to be able to provide that. So to your point, the question is, would we want to staff in-school suspension paras for our elementary schools? I think is what your point is.
Okay, so this particular slide here, often you may hear the phrase ESE. Principal may make a request for an ESE. That stands for an extended suspension or expulsion. So state regulation does outline the fact that a principal can make that request. The superintendent or designee is responsible for doing that investigation. So an extended suspension is a removal that would be from 11 to 44 days. And there's under two conditions can that occur. So first, the behavior cannot be a manifestation of the student's disability. And so if it's not a manifestation of the disability and the student's return to school would pose an imminent risk of harm to staff or students, then the outcome of that investigation could certainly be a removal for between 11 to 44 days. The other removal for an extended suspension would be if the student has engaged in chronic and extreme disruptions of the educational process, and that would be across multiple classes throughout the school day. And the school would have to identify the different interventions and strategies that they've implemented to prevent those behaviors from occurring. So under the state regulation, a student can be removed for 11 to 44 days. For an expulsion, that would be a removal from 45 days or higher. And there's only one condition under which that can occur, and that would be if the investigation has yielded that the student's return to school before the completion of the expulsion period would be posing too much of an imminent risk of harm to students or staff. And so we do utilize a threat assessment process. We've had that in place for several years. So typically when we have one of these requests and there's a threat involved, we would initiate that process at the school level with the principal. That starts with an interview of the student with specific questions, consultation with a social worker or some other clinical mental health employee. And then there's a team that would come together and identify what the risk level is. And certainly if the risk level is high or imminent, the student could be removed for more than 11 school days. Under both of these, the state regulations do require that we limit the duration of the exclusion to the shortest period possible. And I'm gonna share some data on our ESE requests and those outcomes a little bit later.
Who is the person? Is it the superintendent or is there a designee? Who is deciding this currently?
So currently that's me. And so we actually, as part of the process, we have a pupil personnel worker that provides a second layer of due process. So within that first 10 days of suspension, I have a pupil personnel worker assigned to the case, and they meet with the student and the legal parent and provide a second layer of due process to make sure that our information is accurate. They submit a report to me with a recommendation, and then based upon that written report and other facts within the investigation, I make that decision.
So do you make the decision for the students going to ICL?
I do. I'm on the committee,
Okay.
and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So I am one of the committee members.
How many expulsions have you done this year?
So as of today, there's 34, but we've completed 33.
Out of how many students do we have in the county now?
About 22,000.
Okay.
Right. So now I'm going to take us through some of the work that we have been engaged in this district in the last few years to continue to evolve our approach to supporting positive learning environments. So first of all, I think it's really important to note that much of the work we've done really stemmed from a work group that we created in the 22-23 school year. And we created a work group at that time because of concerns with student discipline in our schools. The work group consisted of both school-based and central office team members, and this group put several steps in motion to support a positive learning environment in our schools. The work group based their proposed actions on feedback from conducting multiple focus groups with school staff who shared with us what they saw from their spaces and working in schools, what they saw working, and where they saw as our areas for improvement. An overarching piece of the approach that was developed by the work group was to have a district-wide focus on school culture and climate to ensure that we have a common language about our work with students, that we support staff in learning evidence-based practices to create an environment that supports student learning. And we landed on building off the work started at South High and have been using the text Classroom 180 to guide professional learning resources for schools. These resources help our staff learn how to implement Tier 1 behavioral strategies in their classroom, and these behavioral supports are designed to proactively teach and reinforce positive behaviors for all students across school settings. The resources also teach de-escalation strategies to help equip staff to respond to challenging behaviors in ways that reduce those chances of escalation, model emotional regulation, and maintain our relationships with our students. Part of the learning for our staff happens in our student support team, or SST meetings, where staff brings students forward to the team for advice and support and planning for those specific student behavioral needs. Adding a dedicated behavior SST structure with a BCBA attending is one of the suggestions that came from our work group. Now we know the importance. I'm going to start with birth to K, talk about elementary, and then end with secondary. The work of our birth to K team is vital in providing early intervention support for our students. Our birth to K team receives referrals from a variety of places for families with newborn and young children who could benefit from early intervention from one of our related service providers. The team has been grappling with how best to build relationships and trust with our families to increase their likelihood of engaging with our service providers before they enter pre-K. As you know, early intervention is vital and will be a game changer for when a student enters pre-K. The reason why it's important is because our team can work to mitigate developmental gaps for our students before they enter pre-K and kindergarten. Our Birth to K team has been leveraging exploration play groups in the community to build connections with our families naturally. Through this experience, they can meet our providers, our families can meet our providers, and be more likely to engage and follow through with those related services for their child. Another aspect of our approach to supporting positive school climate has been the addition of assistant principals to our elementary schools, starting with those schools with special education programs. The Board of Education supported a mid-year addition of 4 assistant principals to provide needed supervisory support. I've asked Ms. Hammond from Paramount to join us today to speak to the impact of that addition. We have 1 elementary school left with special education programming and no assistant principal, which is Sharpsburg Elementary. We've also seen the benefit of having the support of our board certified behavioral analysts, or BCBAs, as team members in our elementary schools, as they can assist teachers, paras, and administrators in teaching the behavioral skills that our students need. The Board of Education received an update from our school teams in February about our BCBA's impact in closing those behavioral learning gaps for our students. During that presentation, you heard the value of having a full-time BCBA, heard the value that having a full-time BCBA in a school has, and we've seen that our schools with access to COP or other grant funds have chosen to add their own full-time BCBA, and we have additional schools adding for next year. We currently then have 4 BCBA positions that are available to support the remaining 18 elementary schools that do not have a full-time grant-funded BCBA. We've also seen the need to reorganize our behavior support programming in our elementary schools to create more special education classrooms. We began this work in January based on school team feedback about the needs of the students we're serving in our current engaged programs, and the recognition that the students need a more specialized approach. The chart on the screen represents our shift to create classrooms that align more with our students' needs. Part of that evaluation of our students' needs includes adding 2 enhanced classrooms for Funkstown Elementary for next school year. These classrooms will be serving our most complex students in our STEP and Summit classrooms. We will initiate the vision behind Landon's project by adding collaboration with our medical and higher education partners to help us create innovative approaches to serving students in these programs. Now I'm going to make a shift to secondary, and we'll share the work we focused on over the last 3 years. 3 years ago, the feedback from our secondary schools centered around the need for additional student supervisory support and more creative options to allow for flexibility in our students' school day. Student supervision in our secondary schools is more complex than in the past. Our school leaders describe their day as very reactionary, responding to issues and being unable to focus on prevention or instruction. Thus, in early 2023, we invested in the addition of school security employees at 8 of our 17 secondary schools to be able to support staff in monitoring the school environment and proactively diffuse potential issues with students. The Board of Education heard a presentation from our school teams on the positive impact on school climate that they're seeing with the addition of these school safety employee team members in their schools. Working with our Hagerstown Middle School principals, starting in the 23-24 school year, we built out the concept of Alternative One plans for schools. Alt-1 plans describe the school's approach to providing behavioral support during the school day to a targeted group of students who need additional support to be successful in their academic part of their day. To build out their Alt-1 plan, these 4 schools received a behavior support teacher through general fund staffing, and we added a paraeducator for each school using grant funding. These 4 schools are seeing the great benefit of having behavior support staffing and programming, and we have team members from Springfield Middle here today to speak to their work. Since the start of last school year, all of our secondary schools develop Alt-1 plans, but only these 4 schools receive staffing to support their work. There is an opportunity here to support our schools in the future with the addition of staffing beyond these 4. Based on the success our Hagerstown schools have seen with the behavior support Alt-1 staffing, they are investing in building out their programs further using their COP funding. We're also currently using grant funds to provide 1 BCBA for secondary Alternative One programming, and she largely works with these 4 middle schools. For the start of the 23-24 school year, we also saw the need to combine our approach to alternative programs for secondary students under one roof. Often, serving our students who desire or need something other than what our comprehensive secondary schools offer requires the ability to be creative and fluid. By combining our virtual programming, behavior support, and evening classes under one program, we are more efficient, and we can look at all 3 programs or a combination thereof as we create a programming approach for our students. The slide also provides an update on the enrollment since our last board presentation on the ILC for the 3 main programs housed there. Our connected enrollment is down slightly, which isn't uncommon as students may desire to return to in-person programming for the end of the school year, and our elected supported enrollment and our extended enrollment have increased. A note for next year, we piloted this year, and we will continue offering the elected program to second semester 9th graders and all 10th grade students. So at this time, I will turn the presentation back over to Mr. Jacoby to share some current discipline data in our schools.
All right, so the first slide here is the office referral counts through April 15th of each year. So the values on the screen there represent a cutoff each year on April 15th so that it was more of an apples to apple comparison. Perhaps look first on the far right where you see the all column. You can see that compared to last school year, which was a little over 19,000 office referrals through April 15th. This year, we're right under 17,000 office referrals, so we do have about an 11% decline in office referrals compared to last year. Looking in the far left at the elementary referrals, you can see that they are up slightly as compared to the past 2 years. Middle school has a significant decline compared to last year. You can see there's about a 3,000 office referral drop. We did reach out to the principals of those. There were primarily 3 middle schools that attributed to that drop or that decrease. So I reached out and we gathered some information to try to figure out, what were the factors that led to those reductions. So all 3 of the leaders in those buildings had indicated that the presence of the school security assistants, they contribute that greatly to the reduction with the hallway and the office referrals, their work, their visibility, they're able to serve as prevention in and around the building, and also as a quick response when there is an issue that occurs. The one thing that all 3 leaders also cited with the school security assistants was the relationships that our school security assistants are able to bridge with students that could be challenging during the school day. The other thing that all 3 of the leaders in those 3 middle schools had cited that they believe was a primary factor to that reduction was their renewed focus on providing professional development to staff in the building. So they listed different areas, professional development in classroom management. One specifically cited that they had started something new with having the new teachers meet weekly with the lead teachers to talk about classroom management. There were conversations in professional development about the infraction process and how to manage classroom behaviors, but also the PBIS programs. If you look at the high school data, you can see that it is up as compared to last year as far as the number of referrals to the office. When we look at the data by school, that increase actually is attributed to one specific school. So again, we reached out to that one school, and they had indicated 2 factors that led to that increase. The first factor was their consistent response to addressing cell phone violations this past school year. So they had a significant increase. I think it was at least about 700 additional infractions involving cell phone violations, where they've had to work with students on that particular issue. The other increase at that school was in reference to students that were cutting class. And so what we heard was that with the school security assistants being around the building, students that were choosing to not go to class were identified much more quickly, and the administration was able to be more responsive with those particular incidents. So moving on to this next slide, and I do want to point out that the 22-23 school year and the 23-24 school year in this slide, these are end-of-year percents. So this represents the percent of our students that are suspended K through 12. These are unduplicated. So if a student was suspended twice, they're represented one time within the percents. So again, the first 2 years is end-of-year data that we do report to the state. And then the current school year is as of April 15th. So it's a little bit of an adjustment compared to the data in the previous slide. So if you look at that, we've kind of always hovered around the state average with removal rate. Last school year, we were slightly above the state average at 4.9%. Currently, as of April 15th, we were around 3.8% removal rate. Checked that yesterday, and we're now at 4.2%. So the denominator doesn't change. The state uses the September 30th enrollment, so that value will continue to tick up as we close out the school year. This slide here it's the same data as the previous slide, but instead of being represented as a percent, it's actually a count of students. So you can see in the 22-23 school year, there were 949 suspensions. Then last school year, it was 1,044. And currently, through April 15th, we were at 827. I did check that as well yesterday. We're at 908 as of yesterday. So that value will continue to go up as we go through the remaining few
And that's
weeks.
the same as the other, where it might have been the same student suspended 3 times, but you're only counting it as one.
Yeah, that's correct. These are unduplicated student counts. I think I share typically every year, the one data point that's not on here that I like to share is that out of the 827 or 908 suspensions, about 68% of the students are not suspended. They don't commit an infraction or offense that leads to a second out-of-school suspension.
Can I ask a question real quick before we get too far ahead? So when it comes to the school that was doing the cell phone referrals, what are they finding? Are they finding that they're getting a handle on things because they're giving more referrals?
Yeah, that was my understanding from them, that it's still quite challenging.
Yeah.
The challenge still exists, but they were trying to provide greater consistency with responding to those violations so that hopefully over time, they have fewer of those infractions
Was that a middle school?
as high school.
But with those cell phone referrals, it's still progressive discipline, correct?
Yeah, so it could be typically the first offense is a warning, a conversation with the student, maybe get the phone back at the end of the day. Second conversation might involve a parent. Conversation with the student could lead to a partial day of in-school suspension or ISS with confiscation of the phone. So it is progressively could if it leads into like a disruption, then it could be like a short-term suspension for that.
So to me, it doesn't sound like referrals are bad. Referrals are getting our students back on track and knowing what's acceptable and what isn't.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This slide here is the same data as the previous slide, but it's broken out by level. And we do have, the state breaks out the levels, elementary, middle, high, and combined. We do have 2 schools that are considered combined schools. Those are Hancock Middle Senior High and also Marshall Street School. So as you can see, elementary suspensions are very close to what they were last year. They've actually exceeded. I looked that up yesterday. So we're currently at 68, no longer 56. Middle school suspensions are down sharply, and I anticipate that to probably continue to be the case. We probably will have fewer suspensions as compared to the last 2 years as we close out this school year. The high school data, as of right now, we're trending at 401. If I had to project that, it probably will be between the last 2 school years as we close out this school year. Then the last data slide shows outcomes to the extended suspension expulsion requests. Those are the ones that that I investigate and determine an outcome for those. So we do have currently 34, but 33 of these investigations are completed. 9 of them led to a removal for 45 or more days. 13 of them led to a removal between 11 and 44 days. I would say the majority of those are in the 40-day range before they return to school. We did have 8 requests, but when it went to the IEP meeting to determine if it was a manifestation, it was determined to be a manifestation. So when that occurs, the IEP team, the actual extended suspension request ends, and the IEP team meets to determine next steps for that student. And then we had three requests that were made that were not approved for a removal for more than 10 days.
These extended expulsions, do they end up over at Antietam?
All right, so at this point, we'd like to turn the presentation over to our school team members. We've shared a lot with you about our approach and our work from the central office perspective. As central office leaders, we listen very carefully to our staff in schools. So we thought it was important that in their voice, they share with you today what they see working in terms of our ability to create a positive learning environment for students. And after they've all shared what they see working, we'll do another round and they'll share what they see, because I asked them to also share, the board is interested too, and where you see opportunities for growth. So they will share that after we've heard what's working. So we're going to start with Mr. Orth down here.
All right, good afternoon. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Jesse Orth. I'm one of the assistant principals at Bester Elementary. I'm here with Caitlin Repp, who is a second grade teacher at Bester, and she'll be sharing her thoughts here in just a few minutes. Over the past 3.5 years, Bester team has really worked tirelessly to transform the climate and culture at Bester. For years, Bester's carried this reputation of being a school that was considered tough or difficult, in no small part because of challenging student behavior. As part of an integrated and comprehensive course of action, we've really worked to try and shift that paradigm, and we've taken numerous steps to address that challenge that was in front of us. So one of the first steps that we took was using our community school funds to hire a full-time board-certified behavior analyst, or BCBA. So the BCBA came in and really looked and supported us from a school-wide approach at first, and looked at what were our school-wide responses to behavior, what were root causes of behavior, what things did we need to implement from a school-wide perspective to better support the behavior that was occurring in our school. How could we be more responsive through Tier 1 supports, but also how can we put in preventative measures so that the behavior doesn't occur in the first place? So as part of that, the BCBA has worked extensively with the administrative team, but has also worked directly with our teachers and our staff through open office hours, through classroom visits, through the SST process to support our teachers, and also, through the SST process, sometimes our families and our students directly. One of the other things that BCBA has been able to do over the past couple of years is implement something called skills-based training. So skills-based training is typically seen more in a clinical setting. And really what it is a 6-level process where we work in an environment with a student, some of our most behaviorally challenged students, to teach them the skills that they don't have. Things as simple as like how to wait for something that I really want, how to ask for a turn. They go through the levels, and at the end of it, the final level is transference. And how do we transfer all of these things back out into our everyday lives, including our lives in the classroom? So, another component to Bester's approach has really been that integrated approach in bolstering our students' access to our school counselor and our school social workers. Their lens is through that therapeutic rapport lens with students and with our families. They work extensively with our families, and it's really had a significant impact in navigating challenging behavior because they, again, take that different lens, but also when we recognize there may be a medical concern or there may be a need for more extensive therapeutic needs, they can refer out for those kind of things and work with our community partners to do that. Or if there's basic needs not being met, we can refer out to some of our community partners to support with those wraparound services. So through their level of care, we've been able to support both our students and our families in addressing those behavioral concerns, but their work is more in that person-centered therapeutic realm. So another major shift that Bester's taken on is to our programming. At Bester, we do have an Engage program. And we also, this year, began a STEP program. So in terms of our Engage program, again, you heard a little bit about the comprehensive supports. We've really leaned into that. And what that's done is reduce the number of students who are accessing Engage at Bester. For, you know, my understanding before I arrived there, that we had full classrooms of engaged students and students who were waiting to get into those classrooms. That's no longer the case. We shifted our model to support students in classrooms, but also, you know, take necessary steps when we had to so that they could access those programs when it was needed. And, you know, really our mindset has gone from that question of, okay, so what do we need to do to get this student into Engage, to how do we prevent them from needing to access that program in the first place? How can we put those preventative measures in place? So in terms of our STEP program, one of the things that, as we reflected on last year and thinking about students that accessed Engage, we recognized that we had a lot of young learners that lacked functional communication skills, and, you know, displayed challenging behavior as a result of not being able to communicate wants, basic wants and needs. So part of our, you know, we got creative a little bit last year to kind of almost create a STEP program in our school through Engage, but this year we're able to actually offer that as its own self-contained special ed environment. And it really has been instrumental in meeting the needs of some of our most fragile young learners in kindergarten through second grade. So the other thing I want to speak to is over the past 2 years, our administrative team has worked hard to restructure itself and really look at how are we doing business within the school, specifically in our specific roles and responsibilities. So this past year, you know, I've been able to be lead administrator for 2 grade levels, for our STEP classroom, for our special education supports, for our multilingual learner supports, for our intervention supports. My other administrative colleagues have taken on their own respective lead roles with specific grade levels or specific teams in our building. And what this restructuring has really helped us to do is ensure clarity of communication between administrators, our staff, our students, and our families. And through that, we've really been able to build some deep relationships across all those stakeholder groups so that, again, when we have to address things like student behavior, there's a very thoughtful process behind that. So while I'm proud of sharing all those things that we've done with you, I also understand that the rubber meets the road with the data, right? And what does the data tell us? So in 2023 through April 30th, Bester had 478 disciplinary referrals, of which 59% of would be considered major violations, which would be things like fighting, physical attack, or threats. This last year, in the 2023-2024 school year, through the end of April, that number dropped to 307 disciplinary referrals, with approximately 47% of those being those same major violations. So that was a reduction of 171 referrals and a 12% reduction in major violation referrals. So in this current school year, you know, data, we just finished April, so it's current data. We have 269 disciplinary referrals as of this moment, of which 55% this year are of those major violations. So we did reduce the number of referrals by another 38 referrals from the same time last year. As you heard, like, our percentage of major violations is up a little bit. It's still down from that 2-year mark. But what I can tell you from processing those referrals and working with students and families on them is that the severity of what we're dealing with, even in those major violations, looks very different than even a year ago. So all this to say from my end that, you know, Bester still has its challenges with student behavior. There's, you know, no getting around that. We're still working, you know, toward those ends. But the data shows that our intentional, purposeful, comprehensive, and integrated action steps that we've taken have had an impact. Each day, we continue to examine our practices and implement new action steps when needed to ensure that Besser is a safe and welcoming environment where all of our learners can achieve their full potential. Thank you.
Hi, as Jesse stated, my name is Caitlin Repp, and I teach second grade at Bester. I've been there for 9 years. So I've seen a lot of culture shifts in our building, but I'm happy to come here and say that the culture of Bester has really improved in the last 3.5 years. When I first started at Bester, I would go to professional development around the county and say, I work at Bester. And the reaction would be, oh my gosh, so sorry. But now it's like, oh, that's great for you. So I'm happy to say that teachers want to work at Bester. We feel that we're valued, we feel that our voices are being heard, and we feel that we can handle the challenges that are coming our way. So as you've heard, our admin team is being separated now by grade level. So this provides each grade level with one point of contact to come to for our questions. Any questions I have, I can bring it to my assigned assistant principal, and him and I are able to talk through solutions, and we're able to come up with something right away instead of passing it on to someone else. And in these conversations with him, I feel very valued, and I feel like my experience and my opinions are very valued by him. As Mr. Orth mentioned, our explosive behaviors at Bester are decreasing over the past 3.5 years. And from my perspective as a teacher, the decrease could be contributed to our Engage program or our BCBA or the professional development we've had at Bester surrounding behavior management. 3.5 years ago, when I would call for support with an explosive behavior in my classroom, it would take time for a staff member to respond. And sometimes I would have to call another number or somebody else to get someone to respond. Now, when I call for support, I call one line and they respond very quickly. I use a leveled code so that they're able to understand how to respond to my situation. As I said before, our BCBA at Bester could be another reason why the referrals are decreasing, because she's working with students and staff. Mr. Orth kind of talked about the work that she does with students, but I wanted to touch on what she's doing with staff. Staff members can contact her regarding our specific behavior situations that we're having. She has office hours every day. So if I'm struggling with something, I know exactly who I can go to, and she's going to give me real things that I can implement in my classroom right away. She also will come schedule a time where she can see a specific student and see the behaviors that they're showing and give me feedback, maybe tell me things that I should continue doing or things that I should try adding in. So I can confidently say that she's been a big help when it comes to handling behavior at Bester. 4 years ago, I was asked to co-chair the PBIS committee at Bester, and I spent some time during the summer really researching a behavior management tool that our entire school could use and that would help us communicate behaviors with parents and families. And my research led me to Live School. Live School is a behavior management platform that we use at Bester to reward and also analyze student behavior. It's been a great addition to Bester because it allows all staff members to easily reward good behavior. So if my class is walking down the hallway and Mr. Orth sees us and he sees that we're walking quietly, he can pull up the app on his phone, quickly go to my class and give every student a point, and they'll hear the little bing and know that they've done something right. With this app, reports can also be generated to show trends in student behavior, and parents can also opt to receive a weekly report on their students' behavior. At Bester, we've also created a Live School Leader of the Day position that students can earn by having the most points in their class at the end of the day. And from my perspective, my students work really hard to become the Live School Leader of the Day. A small certificate is sent home with them, and they're able to celebrate their successes with their family. So it's a good way to show off all this positive behavior that we're seeing. So I'm glad that I was able to provide you a little snapshot of what it's like from a teacher's perspective at Bester.
Do you find a lot of parents are requesting those reports?
In the beginning, yes, a lot of parents are requesting the reports. They have to go in and put their email in, but once they have it, they really like to see the reports. If they're not able to get in contact with the teacher, they can always see how their student's doing.
Is this for every single student?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
So Caitlin, if you had to make the decision, as we do often, between more teachers and paras and more support staff, which would you choose?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I think it depends. I think that teachers are really important, but the teachers, especially at Bester, they have to buy in. They have to be all in at Bester. And if they're not all in, then we need somebody who's going to be all in. So it depends on, what your feelings are there. And I think that right now we have a good staff who wants to be there and who really cares about the students and is able to handle the behavior, and they have the tools to do so. So I really think it just depends.
I struggle with that all the time.
Yeah.
How many students do you have?
We're currently at about 520 students.
And do you work closely with Sam Marr's community, Bester Community Home?
We do. They are one of our community partners that we work extensively with.
Good afternoon. I'm Jenny Hammond, principal at Paramount, and I was asked to speak about how the addition of an assistant principal at Paramount has made a positive impact. So I think, first of all, it's been an absolute game changer for me at Paramount, and I feel like we're still with an assistant principal coming on mid-year. I still think that we're kind of in that learning curve. So even with that, it's just made such a huge impact. So I'm very excited to see where it leads next year and in the coming years. I think the biggest thing is just that increased amount of time that we can support teachers and students. So kind of going back to what we were saying before, whereas I feel like when it was just me, I was being very reactive. And I wasn't able to get ahead of things. So now I feel like we're able to be proactive with helping teachers to really dive into those student behaviors and work through some of those strategies to get those under control in the classroom and really brainstorm with the teachers. I'm also, not that it's behavior necessarily, but I am also able to get into classrooms a lot more to provide that instructional feedback, which is huge. So at Paramount, we have, as many of you know, we have 2 program classrooms, high needs students and RISE. And with that, there's a total of 18 students that have IEPs in those classrooms. And that's just a portion of the 70 plus IEPs that we have at Paramount. So with that, obviously comes a lot of meetings. And prior to having an AP, I never felt, whether it was an IEP meeting, a 504 meeting, a student support meeting, all of which involve parents, I never felt like I was fully present in those meetings because I was always listening for the walkie. Many times I had to actually get up and leave those meetings to help support the building with whatever needs were going on. But now we are able to divide and conquer, and I am able to turn my walkie off and be fully present in these meetings and just very active in the meetings, which I think makes a huge difference in supporting both all of our staff, our students, and our families. So that's one of the biggest things, I think, is just being able to be fully present in those meetings, especially when you have parents involved. They want to see that. In addition, our lunch shifts they run for 2 hours and 5 minutes. So if you look at a student day, that is almost a third of a student day is spent supporting the cafeteria. So prior to having an assistant principal, when I was in the cafeteria supporting, a lot of times, very much like the meetings, I would get pulled out of the cafeteria to support other needs in the building. Because obviously, even though the lunch shifts are going on, the school building doesn't stop. So I was pulled from the cafeteria, or if something was going on in the cafeteria, I was unable to support in other areas of the building. So now with an assistant principal, Mrs. Pine has really taken charge of the cafeteria, and she is able to devote that 2 hours and 5 minutes in the cafeteria. Because what we were seeing prior to her coming on is when I was not in there able to support the staff and students, behaviors and a lot of incidents that happened in the cafeteria would then trickle over into the classroom. Teachers would have to deal with it, and then that was then cutting into class instruction. So a lot of that has, we've gotten ahead of that, and we've been able to stop that, and we take care of everything in the cafeteria. So that's been great. Honestly, I can't imagine going back to not having an assistant principal. You know, I don't know how much weight it holds, but I know I got to speak to Mr. Gesford a little bit when he came to visit. You know, I was working 10 hours daily, just trying to keep my head above water, doing all the things that a principal does. And I didn't really feel like I was doing any of it real well, but it leads to burnout. It leads to burnout real fast. And I just feel like I have that support now. We're able to, you know, divide the duties, and we're able to bounce ideas off of one another. There's a lot of confidential information that you don't really have anyone to share it with, but when you have that assistant principal, you can work together to solve a lot of issues. So, thank you for that.
Good afternoon, Dr. Zentmeyer, members of the board. My name is Chayla Martinez, and I'm a social worker at Ruth M. Monroe Primary School.
Hello, my name is Adam Carver. I'm an assistant principal at Ruth Ann Monroe Primary School. Ruth Ann Monroe Primary School is a pre-K through 2 school, the only primary school that we have in the county. We have just over 600 students there, but our main focus today is we're going to be talking about our Engage program. Our Engage program services a small percentage of the students at the school. I believe we have 10 official Engage students, but our Engage staff members also service many other students throughout the school that may be struggling with some behaviors. And each day might be different depending on what's going on throughout the building. But a little background, our Engage staff, we have gone through a lot of turnover this year with our paraprofessionals, classroom teachers. So there's been some rebuilding, some reestablishing some norms, reestablishing what we're looking at with our Engage program. And I will let Ms. Martinez kind of go into what we've had to do to bring our program back to that positive side. We had to look at that shift in culture within our staff members.
In addition to servicing families with individual services for students and consultation, I have the privilege of acting as clinical consultant to the program operations as a social worker, and we represent a very hardworking team of teachers and paraprofessionals. Our team has greatly benefited from utilizing partnerships inside and outside of our WCPS in order to gain insight about ways we could transform our relationships with students and thus create shifts in the classroom environment. After reading her text about encouraging safety and fostering positive relationships at school, we have had the opportunity to participate as a staff in consultations with Classroom 180 author and social worker Heather Forbes to discuss our most challenging cases of student behavior, and we've received invaluable feedback on our practices in that way. Our team has also been in close consultation with Dr. Graveline and Dr. Webster to brainstorm strategies for enhancing our students' ability to tolerate stress at school, which we've seen leads to challenging behaviors, and also strengthening our staff's ability to provide a structured, predictable, and therapeutic environment in which they can practice those skills. Our consultation with Dr. Graveline continues in the form of weekly meetings and check-ins to continue fostering a loop of feedback and evaluation for us. We've had the privilege of collaborating with other programs from WCPS, namely Summit and Engage at Salem Avenue Elementary School, in order to take inventory of areas that we're working well in, and also to explore areas for growth in meeting our students' needs. Staff have been able to set reasonable expectations of safe behavior in the classroom with students participating as a part of that process. We have safety rules adopted from Heather Forbes' work that we recite every day in our classroom, and these expectations are reviewed multiple times a day with students as part of a firm and warm process to acclimate them to societal expectations in the classroom that we hope will extend outside of those walls as well. Hand in hand with setting expectations, we prioritize creating frequent opportunities for positive reinforcement of behaviors we want to see. No accomplishment is too small or too large to celebrate in our classroom. We routinely celebrate a successful walk in the hall, a kind statement made to another person, or even just staying in your area. Lastly, we recognize that despite our best efforts, there are acute mental health needs that just cannot be entirely met inside of our classrooms. To address this, we've pushed to refer our students in need to the higher levels of care in the community, including but not limited to outpatient mental health providers, emergency-based care at Meredith, mobile crisis response, and other support-based services for families.
With these changes, we've seen many success stories. One of our biggest successes I'm going to share, and it's one student. He's a second grader, started off the year very unwilling to really work with staff, refusal to go to recess, refusal to work with peers his own age. We were at a loss. We weren't sure what to do. We would try breaks in different classrooms. We would have him work with different staff members. So our engaged team worked with the family. They were able to look at outside services that paired with what we were doing in schools for interventions, going in and pushing in, building that relationship with that student. Over time, we started to notice a change. He wasn't so hardened. He would come up to us, give us hugs, and tell us how much he enjoyed us being with him in that room. And you could definitely tell he's got his favorite staff members. So we make sure that if something's going wrong, we have those staff members go in and work with him. But he went from not wanting to be in a classroom at all and we'll call it disrupting the classroom quite a bit, to pushing into the classroom 15 minutes at a time. And it started off small. Now this happened about halfway through the year. He is now able to push in a full day with support. Now the supporting staff member at this time, they're helping other students because of how successful this student's being. Now all the interventions in between that time, with the SEL groups that are being run with other engaged students, with just coaching and prompting, he has been able to create so much successes, not just behaviorally, but academically. Academically, he is above grade level in reading, and he is now on grade level with his mathematics. So I know it's just one student, but that one student's success kind of lights that fire in all of us to want to have those same successes for all the students that we are working with, regardless what the challenges are. So that leads us into the opportunities for staff, the continued support from CES, the continued collaboration with Dr. Gravlin, with Connie Hartman, with Dr. Webster, in order for our staff members to get the training that they need so that we can be successful with our students.
Our last big shift this year has been really to kind of reconfigure the way we communicate with families and get them as equal partners, the experts of their family really on board with the work we're doing. Our communication approach has shifted to talking to families, to learning from families about what their idea of success is for their student. That entails exploring with families how they want to be updated about student progress, whether that's a text, a call, and partnering with students to communicate home about their progress. We're often asking students for input about what parts of the day are important for them to share home and what areas we need to work on for the next day. And now those communications happen with the student alongside us talking to families. We also worked on providing concrete information to families about how to work on those goals and bridge that gap between what's happening at school and what's happening at home, in the form of just sending home tips about, this is what we practiced today, this is something you can recite these safety rules on the way to school in the car, or like things like that, to really create a united front for our families and our students.
It's so easy to catch a student doing something less positive, but focusing on catching them doing positive, I can see in both of you that that's a top priority. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello. I am Brittany McDonald, Assistant Principal at Springfield Middle School, and I bring with me
Jessica Potter, Alt 1 teacher at Springfield Middle School.
Thank you for having us today. We were asked to come speak today about some of the successes with our Alt 1 program that we have, which has really been a game changer for us at Springfield. I was there before the Alt 1 program and then through kind of the birth of the program and development of the program. In developing the program with Ms. Potter and our admin team in conjunction with our counselor, I think the first thing we had to think of was kind of what does this look like and what's the goal of the program. So for us, we were looking at, in an elementary model where students are with the same teacher or maybe two different teachers, departmentalized. Teachers see the behaviors all day, so they know. In a middle school model where students are traveling between 6+ teachers a day, it becomes a little more challenging to really identify the root cause of the behaviors, the patterns in the behaviors and those things, because they're going amongst all these different adults in their experience. So one of the things that we really wanted to create with our students that were identified as being able to utilize Alt 1 supports was this home base approach, a consistent adult that's going to understand them, know their needs, know their families very, very well, and really be able to take the lead on creating a plan of support for the student. And our goal, to speak to some of the questions from earlier, is to really be proactive. We don't want to be reactionary for our students that have some behavior needs. We try very, very hard to work with students, teachers, staff across the board on where are the concerns and why are those concerns happening and what safeguards can we put in place to teach the student new behaviors if there are just learned behaviors that are there, or what can we do to be proactive in avoiding the behavior altogether. So our Alt 1 staff, we have a teacher and a paraprofessional that are amazing. They know our students inside and out. They know what they love. They know what they don't love. They know, preferred staff. And sometimes that changes by the minute, by the day, and they are flexible to that need. They know, at what time students are going to struggle in transitions. They know what classes are triggers for students that they might need an adult to go with them. They know our staff, and we are blessed that they've both been with us for many years, so they know the staff very, very well. So they also can support teachers and what tools teachers need to work with certain students. So the program really as a whole for us has been wonderful. I'm going to let Jessica, Ms. Potter, talk a little bit more about the opportunities that our program has created because I would say more than anything, and Dr. Kahanik's comments earlier, I was in the background kind of cheering for him because more even than behavior support, we really want our students to feel like they belong at Springfield. Unfortunately, sometimes students that have, some behavior concerns or some things that aren't going great, there is kind of a feeling from them that maybe they don't belong, and we really want them to know their purpose. We want them to know their worth. And when we see them, they get that kind of spark and they're proud and they want to do more of that. So she does a lot of work with them to kind of help foster that, which I think is great. So.
Okay, so everything she said, I know these kids about as well as I know my biological children, sometimes better. In fact, I was sitting over there listening to them all talking, and I thought, oh my gosh, I only have 23 days left. I will be sobbing like a baby on the last day of school when my 8th graders leave me because they have been with me for 2 years. So I know them. The minute they walk in the building, I can look at them, and that's the luxury of my position is that I get more than 45 minutes with them at a time. So if they walk in the building, I immediately look at her and I'm like, they need a minute. And I take them immediately. I'm like, come on, let's go have a snack for breakfast and just get them with me to debrief and de-escalate. And then that's when I'm teaching them the skills that they need. So a lot of our kids, I always say, they're all great kids. They're just making bad choices sometimes. So my job is to say, oh, well, that maybe wasn't the best choice. So what could we have done differently? And then I model for them what to do. And in fact, we're all adults here, but we also make the same mistakes sometimes. And just a few days ago, I wasn't feeling my best. I had no voice. This isn't my voice. And I lost my patience with one of my lovely little ladies. And 2 days ago, I had to model to her. I said, you know what? Actually, it was yesterday. I was like, give me a hug. She said, no thanks. I said, okay. I said, look me in the eyes. I need to apologize to you. I lost my patience, and that was a bad choice. And so that's what I'm doing with them every single day. But on top of that, our pet project this year has been leadership opportunities. So we created the Cougar Crew, and they created a logo. They created t-shirts, and once a month, they deliver room service to their teachers, to all 100 staff members. So in September, they made apple nachos. In October, they made s'mores, and Miss Webster came out for that. it was early in the morning. We were eating s'mores at 9 a.m. That's okay. October, we made, wait, that was October, s'mores. November, we made cupcakes. Fun fact about me, I just returned to teaching 4 years ago from owning a bakery in town, and I decided that was not my life's pleasure. So I closed that and came to teach. And so I taught them how to run a bakery for a day, and they made a 4-pack of cupcakes thanks to our local sponsors that they reached out to. They were calling companies, they were writing letters, they were creating posts to put on our Facebook page to ask for donations. They handwrite thank you cards every month to the people that donate. They deliver to their teachers. And so in a time where maybe they're seen in a negative light more often than we would like for them to be seen, they're delivering to their teachers, and it's a interaction that they're smiling. And I'm telling you, some of these kids, you would think that this teacher was their absolute least favorite person on the planet Earth, but that is who they're delivering to. And they make sure that is my teacher, I'm delivering to them, and they will fight over who they get to deliver to because they want to have that interaction with their teachers, because really what we're seeing is that their behaviors are coming from trauma responses. And so we're having to teach them and show them, look, this is how an appropriate action with an adult can be. This is what an appropriate action with a peer could be. And then through the Cougar Crew, they're actually working on writing, reading, math, social studies, everything. They don't realize it because it's fun, and there are standards that I have identified in my head, but in their mind, it's fun time. So they don't realize that, oh, well, you need to fix that thank you letter, and they rewrite it, and they do it without a fight because they own it. It is their job for the day. In fact, in the fall, one girl, she told her mom told her she could stay home from school the next day, and she said, oh, I'm sorry, I have to work my 9 to 5 tomorrow. 95. And my 95, she called it 95. And she showed up. And so that's the other piece too, is that a lot of, some of these students are part of that chronic absenteeism. And another little fun fact is I message their parents at 7:15 and say, hey, where's my child? And some of them will be like, oh, they'll be right there because they know someone's watching for them. Whereas in a classroom of 30 kids, you take attendance and you move on because you have things that you have to do, and you maybe don't have that relationship with their parents, whereas I do. I'm messaging constantly on Remind, or I'll reach out at any time, and they know that. And I think what Shayla said is I do also work with the kids to say, what would you like me to communicate with your parent or guardian? Because we don't want them to go home and be upset because their whole day wasn't bad. It might have been a minute, and we want to make sure that we spin it in a positive light.
On top of all that, I will add, Ms. Potter in our Alt-1 program works seamlessly with our SST. She regularly is in our student support team meetings where we're reviewing student data and looking at that. I'm happy to report that for all of our students that have been in our program now for both years of its existence, we have seen a decrease in number of referrals for the behaviors that originally got them into the program. So, for some of our students that, will maybe go in the halls and won't go to class, huge decrease in those incidences, disruption referrals, things like that. So definitely the work is working. I think that it's one that is continued work that needs done, but it's definitely working. I will also add, in her conjunction, she won't give herself enough credit. She does a lot of work as well on top of our SST team to make sure that students are connected with outside resources that they need. Because again, she knows these students better than anyone, and she works with our counselors and everyone to make sure that mental health referrals are done if they need done and all of those things. So she's very instrumental in kind of the support plans that our students need. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention in the middle school numbers, I was looking at the data, and again, in my time at Springfield, the addition of the security assistants as well at Springfield, I just shout out to Mr. Mike and Mr. Jim over at Springfield because they're amazing. And I was listening to Ms. Hammond's comments about, the addition of the assistant principal. A lot of those same things are what happened when we added the security assistants for me. So for example, prior to that, maybe a student is missing from class or out at the bathroom for a long time. I would have to stop whatever I was doing and go find that student. It's a safety concern, right? So maybe I was in the middle of an IEP meeting or whatever, but student safety is obviously number one. Security assistants, we barely get those calls now because they're always in the hallway. They're always patrolling bathrooms. times. They're very proactive in response, so our instances of those things have really gone down. They're also really helpful for us working with our Alt-1 students, because sometimes, things do happen and they do get very escalated. Our security assistants are very knowledgeable on de-escalation strategies, and they know our kids because they also are spending a lot of time with our Alt-1 team. So they know for some students, like, hey, that student doesn't like me best, maybe this is best if I get the other person, or hey, I work really well with this student, I'm going to take the lead on this. Or in situations that maybe potentially could be unsafe and Ms. Potter's trying to de-escalate a student, they'll stand in just as a secondary adult because they are very trained in how to kind of help. So our security assistants as well, I would say, have really helped with the climate at Springfield.
Mrs. Murray.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, the Alt-1 program, is that a program that you've developed for Springfield?
So the opportunity was given to us a few years ago to develop a program. We were given freedom and fences, if that's kind of how I like to say that. So some rough guidelines of what it could look like, but very much when we got the directive, it was write a program. Here are the things that you need to make sure you include. Things like, what's your criteria for considering students? So we developed like a matrix of, what are the identifiers that would qualify a student to be considered for Alt-1? What does an exit plan look like for a student that's in Alt-1? Like, how do you know if a student's going to graduate out? Which we did have a student graduate out just a few weeks ago, which was amazing. So we were given some parameters, but then kind of given the freedom to develop the plan from there.
And how many students do you have?
So we currently have 11 students with the one that has graduated. We have kept our program small because we want that very personal attention for our kids. We've had great benefit. Our students really benefit from keeping our numbers small. We are already in the process of identifying students for next year that could potentially benefit from Alt-1 services. So looking at discipline data to finish the year and who are the students we might want to consider or have on the radar. But right now 11. I think we wrote our plan that our max is 15-ish, just because we don't want to overextend and not be able to give that attention.
Is this a self-contained classroom, or do they push it in out?
No, that's a great question. So we do have the ability to pull students to Alt-1 for short times or for certain classes if they're struggling, but all of our students for the most part are out in general education their whole day. We do have a few students that do have a resource period, and those are students that typically those are during their specials block, so like their UARA time, and during that time, Ms. Potter and Ms. Miller are working with them on teaching them replacement strategies, right? So, maybe they really struggle when they get frustrated in ELA and they're just walking out every time. So she'll do a lot of work with, here's what you can do, and they'll do simulations and different things. They'll go talk to the teacher sometimes during that time. So it's a lot of teaching during that time, sometimes working on academic support, because some of them, academics, obviously in conjunction with attendance are a struggle. But for the most part, our program is completely push out. So she does go into classrooms with students if they need support in the classroom, or sometimes students will come out for breaks. They just need a minute. Don't we all sometimes?
The other question I wanted to ask, can you explain to us the difference between Summit, Rise, Step, and Engage?
Great question.
I look back at Dr. Gravelin. I'm going to have Dr. Gravelin join us. I could, but he's going to do it so much better. I will say, Mrs. Murray, to your question, I have to give a shout out to our 4 Hagerstown Middle School principals who helped Dr. Wilcox and I develop the Alt-1 approach based on what I mentioned earlier. We make our decisions based on what our school teams are telling us, and they met with Dr. Wilcox and I multiple times almost 3 years ago to say, we have got to have more flexibility during the day with our students, similar to what Mr. Gaiman talked about with South that we've done with high schools. We've got to think differently about how we create those relational connections, how we have like a home-based space for kids to pull out. You've heard a consistent theme about just having that wraparound support to support the day-to-day of instruction. So a big thank you to our 4 principals in those middle schools, because they helped us develop the idea. And when I met Jessica at Springfield as a teacher, I was like, she'd be perfect, right? She is perfectly made for this role. So we have amazing staff, and I just am overwhelmed with that right now too, listening to everyone talk about their work. But Dr. Gravelin is going to give you a summary of the programming.
So we'll begin with STEP, since that's our K-2 programming. So STEP is a K-2 programming for students that have significant academic gaps or significant academic gaps and challenging behaviors. And so we spend those 3 years really focusing on addressing those academic gaps and those behaviors. And then at the end of 2nd grade, we update all of their, if they're special education students, so we update their assessments and then have discussions as an IEP team. What does third grade look like? So that brings us to RISE, which this year RISE does go K through 12, but next year we're moving it 3 through 12. And those are students with communication concerns, sensory concerns that are still working towards a high school diploma. And so they have varying levels of support to be able to push into the general education classroom or come out if they need that additional support throughout the day. Our Summit program is for students that are K through 12 that have the social emotional needs. And so they're working towards a high school diploma, but they just have those social emotional needs that we have a social worker that is tied to those programs that help address those social emotional needs of the students. Engage was a similar program to Summit, and I think that's sometimes why people ask, what's Summit, what's Engage? And Engage was in our schools within Hagerstown. That's part of our redesign next year in terms of our district programs. We looked at the program, saw where student needs were, and then redesigned them to either be Summit or STEP, just given the needs of our students currently within our district. And so that's why you're seeing some of the classroom increases for next year in terms of both Summit and STEP is redesigning Engage in order to really meet those needs of our students.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Any other comments from the team about where you see, in terms of sharing with the board, opportunities to continue to grow and improve? I'll start down here with Bester.
So a couple of things from the Bester lens. As Dr. Kahanick mentioned, I heard Mr. Carver mention, chronic absenteeism is a continuous challenge with Bester. And we know that when there's not continuity of learning and continuity of students being at school, that we're more likely to see behaviors increase. We have worked exhaustively through our attendance SST process. We've brought in a attendance specialist to help with those things, but it is still something that continues to be a challenge for us and a place that we're still looking to grow and improve. In talking with our students and our families, we hear a lot about what the barriers are to attending school. Some of those are things like, I think all but 60 kids at Bester walk to school every day. And we hear things about community safety and being able to get to and from school on a day-to-day basis that prevent them at times from being, from attending school. In terms of safety, one of the things we got to experience just for a day. So earlier this year, Bester had flooding from a leak. So we had 12 classrooms impacted. And because we were going to have people in and out of our building throughout the day to help clean up and take care of the issue, we were provided with one of the school security staff to come over and just monitor the grounds. We actually heard from students because they were outside during when recess was happening. They were in the hallways. We actually heard from students saying I felt safer because they were there. Like we knew who they were and what they were there for because we did explain that on the front end. So that's, something we continue to think about and explore. And, even the day that they were there, Bester sits in the middle of the community. We had somebody on property who should not have been there and they were able to address it quickly because they were already outside and able to do that. Whereas, on a typical day, we're getting walkied from somebody who's outside for recess with kids. We're making a decision, bring them in, keep them out. Administrators are going out to help support or calling for additional resources to come in, which takes time. So again, that's just something that we continue to look at is how can we improve the safety, both in our community and in our school. The last thing I'll speak to, and Mr. Carver touched on this too, is the need for mental health services in schools. A lot of our students, we refer out to Bester Community of Hope and we refer out to other providers, but we often see lapses in med management. We see lapses in, some of those services that students do need, and they, may be receiving outside of school, but then they lapse. To be able to provide that inside a building, and with, the continuous communication with the building level staff, would be something that for our school would be a game changer. So those are, just things we continue to explore and, solutions we try and be innovative with.
From a teacher's perspective, an opportunity for growth that I've seen at Bester is improvement in student-to-student interaction. A lot of our students are unsure of how to handle conflict with one another, and they may be experiencing things outside of school or learning things outside of school that are not necessarily appropriate for inside of school. So it would be really nice if we had a clear system for conflict resolution that all staff could be trained in and be aware of, and we could all be using one model to help students address these problems.
Continuing to build those partnerships, kind of like Jesse had stated, it doesn't have to always be the mental health piece that we have to build partnerships with. We could look at local businesses. We could look at, things downtown, working with the board of directors. Get information out, share information with our staff members, with our students. Sometimes there's meetings that happen that affect teachers and the world of education that we don't find out until afterwards, because sometimes the things that are happening downtown, we don't have that information, or it's not being given to us in a timely manner was readily available. Yes, we can access board docs, we can access all that, but the reality of it is some of our teachers, they're not going home to watch the meetings. They're going home to write lesson plans. They're going home to take care of their family, their kids. So almost have that newsletter just for that information, building that partnership with the school, with the Board of Education, being able to have that information readily available, even if it's just bulleted notes. Because teachers, once they're in their classroom, they are there for the full grind. They're not stopping to look at their phones. They're not stopping to look at email, maybe at lunch. They're not stopping to look at, oh, what's going on over here today? They're looking at what's best for their kids. And then when they do leave, it's their personal life. They're with their family. They're with their own kids. So they're tending to that on top of writing lesson plans. So I think just having certain partnerships built within the community, and like I said, not just the mental health resources, but with any business, whether it's locally owned or with our own board or our directors in Hagerstown, I believe that can open up a bigger lane for, I guess, just that communication so that everybody is in the know of what's going on. So it's that knowledge piece for me. And I know that there's other things that we could hit on, but Jesse already did a nice job with that, so.
Also, ongoing opportunities for creating spaces for staff to develop professionally in these areas in order to provide these services to our students is paramount to the work that we're doing. I know that we make do with sometimes part of a professional development day, a part of a day in that first week back, but I cannot emphasize enough that we need that time to collaborate as a team in our spaces at our schools.
One of the things that it was a great question, right? What can we work on that is kind of unique to my circumstance, so maybe too narrow, but my students currently are 8th grade students, so I will be, as long as I'm still at Springfield, cycling to 6th grade students for next year. So part of my work in that transition is working to look and identify students for next year's 6th grade cohort and who might make use of Alt-1 supports. Who are the students that we should be, who are the families that we should be communicating with? And so, when we look for meeting with students for attendance, for example, right, chronic absenteeism, and we go ahead and we make home visits over the summer, we do all those things, those students are easy to identify because we just go on our data analytics and I can filter to my incoming 6th graders. But when we look at that for behavior support, supports, that process is not so streamlined. So right now, what that looks like for me is having to communicate with all 5 of the feeder schools to try to get information. And there's a lot of variety in the ways that things are kind of being handled at the different elementary schools. So for example, I have a meeting coming up with Mr. Orth to talk about some of his kiddos that are coming my way. But just trying to kind of streamline that communication of who are the students who are receiving behavior supports that are not necessarily through IEP or special education, because those students are already very well identified and supported and placed in programmatic levels. But the gen ed students that have behavior plans or are being supported by behavior support staff, those are not quite as streamlined in that communication. So it takes a lot more digging to figure out, who do I need Ms. Potter to meet day one, right? Who are the families that we want to go ahead and get into the building to make sure that that transition is smooth for their kids. So I would say work there and we've already communicated with Dr. Webster, but I think that's definitely an area for growth. And I'm sure that's not just the case for 5th to 6th grade. I'm sure it's also the case, I'm probably guilty of my 8th graders that I'm sending off to 9th grade. It's just that information is not housed in an easy way, other than running discipline data, which referrals are just one piece of the puzzle for any student and their need. So that's my thought.
Okay, I am the luxury of being at the end, so I've thought of 3 things in the meantime. One is consistency in the staff. So one of the reasons I think that Springfield Middle's Alt 1 program is so successful is that my administrative team listens to me and they value my worth. So I can go to them and I can say, I might not be a BCBA on paper because I didn't finish schooling, but I have the expertise of working with these kids, and here's what I think we need to do for this student or that student, and they will all listen to me with open ears. And so in September, I started having nightmares that they were going to leave me. That's what I mean by consistency, okay? And then expansion of the programs. So currently Alt 1 is only at the 4 city schools, but I'm sure that it could benefit all schools and also all high schools, because another nightmare on the regular is that I'm sending these precious 8th graders who are children. Like, I think we sometimes forget as society that they are 13, but they are 13. I don't even want to send an 18-year-old out into the world, let alone a 13-year-old to 8th grade without. So, we did a great job at communicating with the high school, but there isn't a program there for them to go into because they're not special ed. They're gen ed students who are receiving my support, and there isn't that program at the next level. So expansion, and to be honest, I forgot my 3rd one, so I'm sorry.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Me?
So your job, so I understand your job a little better, you kind of travel around to the different classrooms during the day that these 12 different students are in.
Yes, and that made me remember my 3rd one. More time to collaborate with their classroom teachers, because like Mr. Carver said, at the end of the day, like currently, to be honest, I've been watching the clock because my children have been home without an adult because this is past my closing time. So I don't always have that time to stay late because I got to get home for my children who are waiting for mom to come home. So I can't go to the teacher and say, hey, this is why the student had a really hard day today. And while I understand that there are consequences that are needed, and I will stand firm on that with them, and they know, here's why they had a bad day. Maybe you didn't know that they stayed up all night because they weren't feeling well and they had to come to school anyway because we call and say come to school. So the collaboration piece. So I go around, I go into classrooms with them and sit with them. I recognize their need for having a break in my room. I do have a classroom they can come to and spend time with me. I will take them around the building for leadership opportunities that we find daily. Come do this with me, come do that with me. It distracts them from their moment that they're having, because again, I think that a lot of them are, they're not really wanting to misbehave. It's a moment that they're feeling unstable.
So that I understand, what would you say is the difference between your position and a para's position?
So I have the ability to attend all the meetings, do all the data, meet with teachers on the regular as much as I can, provide them with professional development of how best to work with kids like this. The para supports me in our classroom and also the students, and she's more available to go to the classroom. I attend all the SST meetings that involve any conversation around an Alt 1 student or a prospective Alt 1 student. I'm often in the meetings that are for, if they were suspended, they would have a return to school meeting, and I go to that so I can keep that connection with home and talk about goals and next steps and how we can support them. I've developed the lessons that we teach them when we're teaching them the replacement behaviors.
You have input into IEPs and stuff like that, or?
So I do. Most of my students do not have IEPs because, again, they're
Okay.
general education students that are requiring some extra support. Some of mine do have IEPs just because it's separate. So I would go to those IEP meetings as well. I would provide the data for their goals that are tracked marking period, every marking period progress monitoring.
Last question.
Mhm.
Is your position grant funded?
No, the teacher position is not grant funded, but the para position was grant funded for 3 years on the initial creation of the program. So we are next year's year 3.
So what's a rough percentage of administrative going to meetings, push in, pull out?
I would say 90% of my day I'm with the kids, or let's go week, because I barely have to go to that many meetings. I know it sounded like I go to a lot of meetings, but it's like one a week, okay? And then that I don't, so contractually, I'm required planning time because I'm a teacher. I don't take that because that's not consistent. I voluntarily do not take that on a consistent basis because I use it at other times. So each day my schedule is flexible. So this week is Staff Appreciation Week. I'm very active in the social committee and the PBIS committee because we support everyone. So I might take planning at 9 a.m. to put potatoes in the oven. That would be my planning for that minute or my lunchtime. I flex my schedule so that majority of my day I'm available for my kids. And they also know the one time a day that I usually will turn off the walkie is lunch because I like food. But sometimes, every single day, I listen to the walkie anyway, because again, I care about them so much. So I know that if they are in distress for whatever reason, that it might be me that they want. It really is like, they are my children. Some of them think sometimes that they came from me. I think they act like they are, I'm their mom, and I love it. But that's because we have built this relationship through the last 2 years. So I want to be available for them at all times of the day. Even if I'm in a meeting, I will excuse myself from a meeting if my students need me. So I would say 90% of the week I am with the students, whether, and I can't give you a great percentage on how much time is in their classroom, but last year it was significantly more. The kids that have been in our program now for 2 years need me a little less in their classrooms because of the lessons that I've taught them on how to appropriately ask for that break from the room, or how to exist within the realm of the classroom and be a part of their class appropriately.
I would only add that sometimes it is the case as well that if there is a particular student that, let's say math, for example, I don't know why, I would love math, but a student's really struggling in math class for whatever reason, it has been the occasion as well that once we've gone through progressive discipline and there's just that one area that the student is not being successful, that we also have had where a student will then go to Miss Potter for math, and she will work with their math teacher, and the student will report to that classroom. So again, preventatively rather than spinning the wheel until they've learned the skills to be successful in the classroom. We only do that on a class by class basis, and we don't use it often, but like I have used it for one of my 8th graders this year, and we had success. We did it for about 3 weeks. The student was able to do all of their math work. The student was able to gain the skills and then ultimately return to the classroom successfully. So we use it as a teaching, like a timeout and a teaching strategy, but the ultimate goal, of course, is to get them back into the room. And then Ms. Potter, to phase them back, would go into the classroom with her for that next week to make sure that things were still good to go. Yeah.
I think that we can all agree that trauma creates trauma. And my biggest problem with the way that we're doing things is our children are being traumatized at school. And while I hear a lot about what's happening with the behavior students, what are we doing to protect the other students in the classroom? Because I'm not seeing that.
So I think let's think about what we've heard today. There's a big piece around our ability to respond. So we have structures in place so that when there are concerns, we work with, when we have those professionals, like you heard the description of access to behavior programming, or when you just heard the example from Springfield Middle, if you have a student who is unable to function that day, let's say it's a short-term issue that they need to be out of the classroom, we've really worked hard within limited resources as a district to look at first prioritizing the schools you see in front of you for how do we create that flexibility to be able to create spaces to work with students so that they're not having to stay in a classroom where they're just going to be escalated and cause more trauma for the students who are observing it, right? But if you don't have those options, it does become more of a challenge. So what we do see is that we can do the work. It takes building off the successes we've seen where we provide those wraparound supports, those options for classroom teachers to be able to provide support. We can do it. And that's why we thought it was important that you hear from these folks today that we can. It's just a matter of thinking through. Every school is different. Every situation is different. And I think they've described that. But we wrap ourselves around when we have schools that have specific concerns. We show up, the team that's behind me over there. We show up, we work through it to see what we can do to support and make sure that the kids are getting what they need, both the student who is dysregulated and the other students in the classroom.
So when it comes to COP funds, are we able to add more alternative teachers with that? Are we able to do assistant principals?
Great question. So we tried to do the assistant principals with COP funds, and we weren't able to do that. So we cannot add assistant principals. We can add the behavior support teachers, and if you recall on one of the slides, it showed where the schools are building out. Our elementary schools are adding BCBAs. The middle schools, the 4 schools that are COP schools there that already have Alt 1 are adding staff to their program. So they are able to use that grant funding to continue to build. And if you take note of our slides, we tried to note where things are grant funded to be aware that grant funding is being used to support a lot of our behavior support as a district. And that's just something for us to be aware of. And when we see our schools that are the have-nots, and as I transition into what we can do to move forward, it's our county schools that don't have the same resources that our city schools have been able to utilize funds to support. And we've also, per the blueprint, 75%, that's what helped us to fund the behavior support teachers when we looked at our need to spend more dollars in our Hagerstown schools. That was where we shifted some positions to create the behavior support position. So we do have a conversation when we look forward. Before I go into that, I want to also recognize, because I cannot leave out our birth decay work, the early intervention work that we do as a district. When students show up in pre-K, when you think about the feedback we're hearing from schools, pre-K, K, grade 1, those primary grades are where we are seeing the most intense need. And so the more we get involved with families who have been identified with students with developmental needs, the better. And so our Birth Decay team really does still see a lot of opportunity to continue to partner with building relationships with families so that they trust our service providers. Our service providers are pushing into homes largely. So families have to feel comfortable with this person coming into their home. We see a lot of potential to continue to expand our 3-year-old programming. Our 3-year-old programming is currently, 2 play groups a week. That's a big jump to go from that to pre-K. And we hear feedback from our pre-K classrooms because students are showing up with very intense needs. So the more we can think about our work with Birth Decay, the better off our students will be as they enter kindergarten. We also still have, you heard Ms. Hammond talk about the assistant principal and the value that they add to our ability to support teachers in the classroom. We still have 10 of our elementary schools that do not have an assistant principal. We see that as an important step in ensuring that our schools have the hands to be able to provide that supervisory support. So when we think about a school that doesn't have an assistant principal and doesn't have a behavior support program, the only person you have to strategize about how to rearrange your limited staff is the principal alone. So that is a big challenge that we're asking these elementary principals to take on. We've kind of thought through, and in your slides you'll see, we've thought through a rough prioritization when you look at programming. If we had assistant principal, we need an assistant principal at Sharpsburg as we're able. Boonsboro and Clear Spring would benefit from a special education program classrooms. McKay-Daub is a Title I COP school without an assistant principal. Potomac Heights, a COP school without an assistant principal. We will be opening Downsville Pike Elementary. There's an opportunity, hopefully, to add an assistant principal when that school opens. But that's not to leave out our smaller schools. We have the 4 smaller schools that, even though they have a smaller student body, the administrative tasks are fixed. So there's still work to be done, and so we have to really think about how we support those schools as well.
Sorry, are
it's
we
okay.
closing any schools when this Downsville Pike Elementary opens?
Yes, the Fountain Rock Hickory that's right there, so that's to represent Fountain Rock and Hickory are the two that will be consolidated for
okay,
Downsville Pike.
sorry.
Yeah, you're good. All good. We also see the need to continue. We mentioned we're increasing our program classroom for next year. We still need more. As we look at our special education student needs, our students who are being served, whether it's in the gen ed program and then moving into special ed or need to move in the future, we see the need for an enhanced connections classroom at Marshall Street School. I've also listed the staffing that it would take in order to create those classrooms. We have students in connections these are our most unique learners in connections who would benefit from a more intensive classroom. We really need to think about, as we look at our program classroom, being able to differentiate the types of students we're serving within one space to make the healthiest environment possible. We would also see the need to add a summit classroom at Clear Spring Elementary, a step classroom at Boonsboro, and an enhanced connection at a middle school. The variety of student need that we're seeing within our connections group, as I mentioned, even as we think about our youngest learners, those students are moving into middle school. So our middle schools are getting students in their connections program that have a little bit different needs. So we're using this term enhanced to describe maybe it's a little step up from what we currently offer in the program that's listed there. We also know that our schools are benefiting from BCBAs, so there's an opportunity. We thought through if we were to add, look at the schools that have split BCBAs, which schools would we prioritize having more regular access to a BCBA? Our Clear Spring campus definitely would benefit from having access to a full-time BCBA. Smithsburg Elementary and Cascade Elementary, we see a consistent amount of behavioral need that they would benefit from a dedicated BCBA. McKay Daub and Mogginsville. Mogginsville currently has a BCBA they're funding through a school improvement grant, and that will run out after next year. Safety and security assistants, you heard the value from our staff who have the benefit of working with them. We do see the value for our county schools who have fewer administrators. They definitely feel the strain of student supervision, and we know that when we are able, adding these safety and security employees to our county schools would be of great benefit as well. So just in summary, you've heard a lot of things about our work that we've done and hope to continue to build on to provide support to our schools. We've initiated and sustained a district-wide professional learning series. We have improved our structures for student support with implementing Tier 1 strategies and behavior SSTs. We've increased the number of elementary schools with assistant principals, increased the number of BCBAs that are dedicated to one school, increased our elementary specialized programming, adding enhanced elementary specialized classrooms at Funkstown. We've added our safety and security employees to 8 secondary schools. We've added alternative 1 staffing to 4 middle schools. We're utilizing our COP funding to the maximum ability to enhance behavior support programming, and we've combined our alternative programming under the Innovative Learning Center. We know that our work is ongoing and will probably continue to be ongoing, but we know that it's really valuable work in order for us to be able to serve all of our students that we are charged with serving here in Washington County.
I have a question. When you say combining alternative program under Innovate Ed, I still call them by their old names. So explain that to me.
Yeah, so taking the Connected, so the virtual program that was able, taking Connected, taking what was high school, evening high, and making that's extended. And then the supported is what we would formerly refer to as the Antietam program. And then elected is something that we've created where students can apply to choose to go to the supported program. And just the importance that we've seen and the value we've seen in combining those programs under one roof and having it be the Innovative Learning Center is as we're working, and Mr. Jacoby and I are working with students, we have flexibility of moving students between programs because they're all in one. We sit at one table. If we have a student who needs to move to virtual for a period of time, Then we can try in person. Maybe their discipline placement is to start in person, but they blow through that. Then we can move to virtual. Maybe they start virtual and they can come back to in person. But it allows us, maybe they just need to take after school classes and they don't come to the regular school day. But it gives us the flexibility to create a program for students at one table.
But the students in elect ed who are virtual are not able.
All of the students who are in a virtual, if they are in, the elected students are in person. So, but you mean supported? Like if we had a virtual student placement? If we had a virtual student placement who's receiving services through supported, they would be in the same virtual class as students who are in connected.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I personally would like to see the addition of paras for in-school suspension for our youngest learners. And that is legally allowed, correct?
Legally allowed to have in-school intervention for elementary students? Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I use the term intervention because you probably saw Mr. Jacoby and I both pause. There's a difference between in-school suspension and in-school intervention per state guidelines. If you're providing academic work to the student, it's an in-school intervention versus a suspension. A suspension is just purely like you don't have any access to academic learning.
Right.
So we try to do in-school intervention when we're pulling students from the classroom so they're still getting access to learning, but not in the same space.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the enhanced elementary specialized programs at Funkstown Elementary would be like Rockland Woods, where students were brought into that school to be in step. Okay.
Yes, and those two classrooms will serve students who we currently have in our program classrooms that are demanding a high amount from our current staff who are working with them in their program classrooms. They're demonstrating unique needs, and we need another level, which is why we landed on the term enhanced. We need an enhanced version of that program to serve a smaller number in a more intense way, and we're going to try to be innovative in our approach to working with students in this setting. There are also students who would benefit from not being in a comprehensive school because being in the comprehensive school can be distracting and can cause triggered events that just escalate their behavior.
Anybody else?
I had one thing. Speaking to Ms. Rep's point about providing consistent training to teachers in order to address peer-to-peer relations and how to de-escalate conflicts, I just wanted to add that there was a bill that was passed this previous legislative session regarding restorative practices, and it would enlist MSD to create a comprehensive curriculum that school systems could adopt, so maybe that's something we can look into. And I also wanted to ask all of you, because schools are so diverse and they have different needs, obviously you guys are implementing different strategies that apply to your specific school. Is there one particular thing that you would like to see adopted across all schools that you think all schools need to have? And obviously this would be different between elementary school and secondary schools.
I completed a training here 2 summers ago. It was called Life Space Crisis Intervention. Was by far the most powerful training that I participated in. I know that the central office really has hopes to spread it across more. I know the restorative practices is happening as well. A lot of us have attended that. The Life Space Crisis Intervention trainings come with a little bit of a higher price tag, I believe, which is why not all of us have received it. But that is what has helped me be incredibly successful with my students. And I think the more teachers that you have that do it, the better consistency that happens within the buildings, the better response you'll see to behaviors and trauma-informed responses.
We've been doing a really good job with professional development where we're developing a common language. So continuing to create that common language throughout the county, especially with a lot of our kids that move from school to school, teachers that transfer from school to school, we're able to use that common language where the kids have that understanding and so do the staff.
I just want to express my appreciation to all the panelists. Your passion for serving all of our students is quite clear, and I appreciate you taking the time to shine the light on the work that's being done. And in particular, I want to thank Dr. Webster and Mr. Jacoby for their leadership, and most importantly, listening to the voices in our schools. I know as I transitioned in my entry plan, I heard some common themes coming post-pandemic in terms of the challenges, in terms of behaviors. And our team members in our schools are experiencing this each and every day, and you best know how we can best serve our students. So thank you for being a part of the solution. We're not there yet. We still have much work to do, but thank you for speaking authentically and honestly about what's right and the challenges that we still face.
Could I make a
are
request for some
appreciated.
information? On that student misconduct referral counts, could you provide some information on counts for the years 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19? I'd just be curious at what it looked like before COVID, that's all.
Good question.
Anybody else?
Better than
Thank you,
names over
thank you,
Close
thank
school-
you.
School's closing,
Thank you
huh?
very much.
Dr. Savine?
President Zentmeyer, members of the board, as we prepare to conclude our work session, I'll invite our finance team forward. We want to do just a quick touch point. As you know, as a board, your last business meeting, you adopted your draft FY26 general fund budget. We want to take this opportunity to do a touch point to make sure that we've captured what you desire as a board accurately. And now I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Prue. Also joining Mr. Prue, Mr. Sisler, our Executive Director of Finance, as well as Mr. Shives, our Budget and Finance Reporting Analyst. So appreciate the work of this team. Mr. Prue.
Thank you, Dr. Svine, and good afternoon, board members. So as we discussed just a few weeks ago, as you approved your general fund operating budget for FY26, just last Friday, or I guess it was last Tuesday, the county commissioners did approve their budget or reach consensus on their budget to go to the hearing on staff's recommendation that did remove the $2.24 million out of the capital fund for our bus replacements. Part of our approved budget zeroed out that line, assuming that that funding was coming from county government and would have put, for next year, would have put that purchase in a restricted fund. In conversations Dr. Savine has had with board leadership, we provided an option for you, a proposal to balance the budget that has been in your packets when you received them the end of last week, based on what we believe is maybe the intentions of the board. This would be an increase to the bus replacement line. So again, when I say increase, I'm saying above the zero that's there currently for FY26 because that line was zeroed out. This would replace 8 of the 15 proposed buses for FY26. Would also mean that the 7 other buses proposed for replacement would automatically fall to year 13, and we would seek the special waiver from the state superintendent to operate those in a 13th year. Subsequently, we would also, to make this balance, we would decrease the allocation to the OPEB funding allocation of $625,000 and also decrease the salary resource pool for $656,000 to get a net balance back to zero and have a balanced budget for the board. There are
600 and
yeah, sorry, that 656 should have a negative as well. Sorry about that. I noticed it. I didn't notice it when we put it together, but as I was reading it, I was like, whoops. I hope to gloss over it and hope nobody would notice. But yes, that should be a negative 656 from the salary resource pool. Of course, there are, I hate to say, a million other alterations that you could do to balance, but I think from conversations Dr. Svine was having, this may be the will of the board, but I put it up there, and staff is here to answer any questions, or if you want other numbers, we're happy to provide those.
So the 7 buses that we're asking for a waiver, are waivers pretty much guaranteed Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm a
I've never
little
seen a
worried.
waiver not. So we've received waivers the last couple of years because of delays in the manufacturing of the buses. My greatest concern for the board on decreasing this line by 7, it's not really the 13th year bus. But if you want to get back on cycle, next year, the first thing you have to do is you have to add the give or take $1 million that you didn't provide for this year. You have to add that back to be able to buy the 15 that's in the cycle for FY27's budget and whatever inflationary value there is. If you wanted to stretch the entire cycle out, you've got basically 12 years, 15 buses. If you wanted to stretch the entire cycle out to 13 years per se, on average, you'd still be buying 13 and a half, 14 buses a year. So you've got to at least get back to that level. You're kicking the can down the road essentially on the bus replacements for another year. But over time, you've got to get that number back up to be able to get back on cycle. Whatever that cycle is that the board wants to run, you've got to get that number back to the budget to get back on cycle.
I'm assuming we incur additional maintenance costs when we extend it.
The likelihood is yes.
Do we know what that is dollar-wise? Do we have any data to show?
I could ask the team to.
I just was wondering if it's significant. That's all.
I think it's, over time, I think just like, any one of our own vehicles, over time, the older the vehicle gets, the more miles that go on it. The maintenance tends to increase. You may have more downtime. We may have a need to keep more spares over time if we're extending the life on a large number of buses. And there's additional inspections that have to be run on those buses annually.
So does that mean next year it'll be 15 plus these 7 to get us back on track? Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily. You could in theory carry those 7. Every year you'd pick up, let's say, another 7 of your 12 would become 13s. So those 7 that are going to be 13s next year, you'd sell, and 7 of the 12s would become 13s every year. So I would propose that at minimum that you get on track back to 15 in FY27. And then we can decide what cycle do we really want. There is a year that is probably about, when this original cycle was built, there is what I'll call the 12th year. It may not be the 12th year based on how the cycle was built, but there was a 12th year that only had a handful of buses in it. And some board members that have been around may recall a few years back, we had reached the end of life on the buried diesel fuel and unleaded fuel tanks at our bus depot, and they needed to be replaced. So we actually, during that year, we slid those funds over to the maintenance fund so that we could replace those diesel tanks. We now have them above ground, and then we moved it back in a subsequent year. So you have an opportunity that at this point is probably about 8 years down the line where those 7 buses could potentially drop in and get back on schedule 7 or 8 years down the line. But we would want to build back to 15. It would be my recommendation to you to build back to 15 next year.
You could just go ahead and do like 17 buses the next year, 17 buses, and you would eventually build that in there till you get it back up in like 5 or 6 years.
You could, yes. We also, as you recall, with our plan, of course, you may remember you approved 5 additional bus drivers for next year on a thought process of trying to move the bell time for Ruth M. Monroe and Easter and trying to get them earlier in the day. So we're going to have a need for more buses at the same time. So we've got a double-edged problem going on here. So if there's...
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm sorry. From the superintendent's draft budget to when we realized we were getting additional funding from the state, what was the salary resource pool in the approved? Sorry, I just don't have it in front of me to understand like what the decrease of 656,000 takes it to.
So in the superintendent's draft budget, the salary resource pool was $4.734 million. And then in the board's approved budget from April 15th, it went to $8.674 million. And this, with this change, it would drop to just over 8 million.
Okay. Thank you.
So I guess
Looking for consensus?
that's where I was going to go next. Is there consensus on this plan or an alternate plan, or do you need more time and information? If there's consensus on this plan, we could potentially reapprove the budget on the 20th. I expect the commissioners likely will approve their budget that day. And so we could reapprove the budget and sort of hopefully be done with it.
I know this has caused you heartburn. Thank you so much for doing it.
It's just another day.
Anything else?
I'm good with this.
Are we
No,
given
not on the
consensus?
budget.
We got to give consensus.
What?
He's asking for consensus.
Oh, do we have consensus?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
See.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Before
Thanks.
we close, I have one thing I want to ask. So a couple of meetings ago, we pulled from the consent agenda the school safety entry system because we wanted to look at it. The company, we looked at it with the company and everything, but we never made a decision on what we were going to do about that. Can we put that back on the agenda for next business meeting so that we can discuss it and vote on it?
Can we put it on the following one?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to have a discussion and a vote
Yeah.
because we never came to a consensus on that.
Just make sure you let Jen know.
Okay.
Thanks. Anything else? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.